Money is the root of all evil, and there is a nobility in struggling without it. Capitalism is a device of the patriarchy, the machinery of oppression, and along with its bedfellow greed, leads to the innocent suffering, while the undeserving rich get richer and richer and richer. Even the Bible, if that's your tipple, says that it's easier for a camel to pass through the eye of a needle than it is for a rich man to enter the kingdom of heaven. There's no doubt about it. Money is bad. But let's be honest, most of us wouldn't mind a little bit more of it. At the very least, we could put a roof over our heads, keep the heating on, and feed our families. And just think how much better our lives would be if we could afford a bigger house, or get that thing that's been on our mind for the last 6 months, get it fixed. And perhaps a few new clothes in the wardrobe wouldn't hurt, and we could finally book that holiday we've been wanting for all this time. And just think what we could do if we didn't have to worry about money at all, if we didn't have to go to work every day. How much better would our lives be if we didn't need to worry about paying the bills? And when we've covered all the essentials and maybe a few luxuries as well for ourselves, we could help our loved ones. And once they're looked after, maybe we could go on to do something grand, something great, something with a huge impact. Okay, so maybe money isn't so bad after all. Maybe it's not intrinsically evil, but maybe we've just been using it wrong all along. I'm Chris Brock, and this is Conversations on Living, a podcast all about how to live and how to live well. Think of it like a steamship exploring an uncharted river on a strange continent, trying to find its source and gain some understanding along the way. I'll be your captain on this voyage, and I hope you'll join with me as I shovel coal into the boilers to keep the engines turning as we adventure further and further upstream. This week I'm speaking with Noleen Mariappen, who's a business consultant working to promote conscious capitalism and encourage organisations big and small to seek not simply to turn a profit, but to use their wealth and their clout to create impact for good. This is a far-reaching conversation that begins by exploring how companies can turn negative ideas about commerce and money on their heads and become part of the solution instead of part of the problem. We chat about how money, often considered the root of all evil, can become a force for good. And then we go a little deeper as we explore how we can individually break free from the notion that it's shameful to be financially comfortable, and talk about how we can use self-awareness to act authentically and find our purpose, discover our why, attract our tribe, and enjoy the rewards that a life lived in alignment with our values can bestow upon us and others. You can find out more about Noleen at her website, www.noleenm.com, and at www.safaglobal.com, where she works to support sustainable enterprises. And there's also www.thinkocean.earth, where she is tackling the plastic crisis in our seas. Alternatively, seek her out on LinkedIn, where she is the most active. And all of these links will be in the show notes at conversationsonliving.com. And before we get started, I just want to say that this episode of the podcast is made possible by the guys at Headliner. It's the service I use to create those social media audiograms with which I promote the podcast. You've probably seen them, those little animated waveforms on Twitter and Instagram with audio clips from each episode. Headliner is by far the easiest and most powerful way to create them, so if you host a podcast, it's definitely worth checking out at www.headliner.app. Also, a quick shout out to international publicist Kerin Black. Kerin is another supporter of this podcast and a previous guest on the show. She's the founder of talentfinders.com and is offering a publicity and PR bootcamp designed to help you become more visible, increase your influence, and make more impact. It's a 3-week online training course that covers everything from interview preparation to leveraging the power of the media and using publicity for personal branding, all designed to help you move your public profile to the next level. You can find out more about Kerin at www.kerinblack.com. That's KERRINBLACK. And if you're interested in the bootcamp, send her an email to kerin@talentfinders.com. She will also be on the show in a few episodes to talk about this and also about how we can all use a bit of PR and a bit of personal branding to help us spread our message. And don't forget, wherever you're listening to this, please subscribe, rate and review, and tell your friends. Tell them to tell their friends. Tell your grandparents, tell your parents, tell your cats and dogs, the man who lives down the street, the bin men, the postman, your brothers and sisters. Just tell everyone, because it all helps to get the word out there and spread the love. If you want to find out more about previous episodes of this podcast, head out to conversationsonliving.com, where you can also find out information about me and my writing. And while you're there, you can also sign up to my very infrequent newsletter and grab a copy of my most recent book, Shine Manifesto, absolutely free. And if you want to discuss any other ideas that have come up in this podcast, head on over to our Facebook group where the Convo crew all hang out. Just search for Conversations on Living on Facebook. All right, now, without much further ado, here is my conversation with the inspiring and empowering Noleen Mariappen. So, Noleen, thank you for joining me. You are an impact entrepreneur and consultant, and you work in sustainability. So, you're working with kind of social enterprises, I guess, all about conscious capitalism, about using capitalism as a force for good. Could you tell us a little bit about your kind of backstory, how this became something that you do for a living, and kind of what it means as well?
Sure. Thanks so much for having me on, Chris. It's a real pleasure and an honor, and happy to share more. I feel quite I love what I do. What it means really, a little bit of the backstory, I guess. I worked with nonprofits for quite a while because I initially felt that was my happy place. I wanted to make a difference in the world, and I thought that was where I could have the most impact. And I realized very quickly that wasn't the case. And it's not necessarily because nonprofits don't do good work. It's that you see the constant struggle for funding, the lack of their ability to be self-sustaining, and how sometimes the larger the organization becomes, the less, that is actually channeled to the good work that's happening. So business always came quite naturally to me, and I looked at, economic empowerment is a huge factor. I feel like it's one of the areas in which we can truly allow for people to be on an equal footing, and for people to truly participate. And when people are on an equal footing as far as the socioeconomic status goes, it makes it a lot easier to remove barriers and remove boundaries, which causes divisions between people as well. So that was always a big thing. I worked on a number of projects which looked at developing economies, and I decided to put that into practice. So I decided to start my own business, and I did that while working full time on a nonprofit, or a nonprofit project rather. And I was very fortunate. Everything that I'd learned and had been practicing with or through other people helped me to take my first business from startup to launch in 6 months. And startup to exit in 6 months. And I was able to then focus on additional projects and building up a portfolio. And then made some horrific choices and lost everything. And had to start from scratch again. And I have to say that you hear differing viewpoints as to whether it's easier when you start again second time round or whether it's harder. For me, it was a combination. Initially, when it first hit me, it was just like a punch to the gut, and when I realized what had happened, and I thought, I can't actually believe that this is happening. And how do I go through that journey again? Is it possible for me to actually get to where I was? And then my mom actually said something to me. There were about 2 days where I just didn't want to do anything at all. I actually just didn't want to face reality. And I spoke to my mom and I explained what had happened. And she said, Knowles, she calls me Knowles, and she said, Knowles, when have you ever, put your mind to something and not done it? And that was all it took. It just took a reminder that actually if I started moving toward a goal again, I could get there. And I did. I managed to went out to the US. I managed to partner on different projects and started to build up my portfolio again, but with more of a passion and a drive to really focus on positive social and environmental impacts. And so now my business portfolio has a number of projects which are in the impact space. Projects focused on ending plastic pollution crisis. I'm involved in the aquaculture industry with a startup called IntelliAqua, and building an impact ecosystem, which is a technology platform. And on the consulting side, I consult across the board, so with nonprofits, with for-profits, across industries and across sectors. And initially, my consulting was strategy and operations and focused on building businesses and expanding businesses. And now it's focused very much on doing exactly that, but ensuring that sustainability and positive social and environmental impact is built in, but built in a way which isn't just about reporting, built in a way where there is real impact and it's truly making a difference in the lives of others. And we also work through a community interest company that I set up to support businesses in this way to measure the impact that they're having through engaging with stakeholders. Because often projects talk about the impact they're having, and it's really the people that they say are being impacted that should be talking about the impact that's being had. And that's it in a little or a big nutshell.
So you mentioned the word impact there quite a lot. So you're talking about kind of environmental impact, positive impact. So in a way, using business as a way to just have a positive outcome, rather than this kind of image of capitalism as being just this kind of immense machine that just devours everything in its path, with an occasional bit of greenwashing to make us think it's actually doing something good. You're actually trying to use business and capitalism, I guess, as a force for positive change. Absolutely,
that's exactly. So it's trying to encourage more businesses. It's not just for-profit organizations where this happens. It's across the board, where often there is intention for good, but it doesn't quite happen. So this is about looking at how we embed those practices for positive social and environmental impact into operations, whether it's business operations, nonprofit operations. How are we looking at the way that we engage with people and the environment? If we're investing into certain activities, are those activities actually having the outcomes that we want or that we believe they're going to have, or that we expect to have? And if they're not, what are we doing about it? Or are we turning a blind eye and just reporting that that's what we're funding, so it must be good, as the case was with a lot of greenwashing.
I mean, is there yeah, exactly, this whole notion of optics. Is there a sense that companies are doing this for optics, for PR, and that really an organization is just a big soulless money-making machine? Or is there a sense of value and alignment with kind of a bigger cause behind all of this? Is there a kind of human conscience behind driving this,
Yeah, so it's a mixture. Yeah. There are a lot of companies who are now employing sustainability professionals to work in-house, who are looking at their systems and processes and looking at where they source things from and all of the, the internals and the reporting. And, in terms of financial sustainability, there are now mandates where there are certain requirements that people have to report on. So it's sort of legal requirements and mandated requirements. So, and of course, you hear of COP26 and you hear of all these goals that are being signed up to, the Sustainable Development Goals. So countries are actually starting to sign up to and commit to reaching these goals. And what this means is there's the trickle down effect, because even though countries are signing up to them, what it actually means is that the people within the country are having to hit those targets. And the easiest ones to regulate are, industry, business, financial. Financial is a business, but it's a very regulated industry more than most. So that is where a lot of the impact is targeted, or the kind of mandate on impact is targeted. And then you look at specific industries like the energy industry and that sort of thing. So with these companies, some of it is because it's mandated. There are a number of companies where they're starting to see the benefits of having this positive, the purpose-driven business. And I'm not sure if you've noticed, but probably over the last 2 to 3 months, you can't listen to an advert or see anything without a bit of the green being thrown into it. There's so much happening in that space. And another reason for it, whether it's driven by purpose or whether it's driven by a market need and demand, part of that market need and demand is because consumers are becoming more conscious and becoming more conscientious in their purchasing choices. So they're choosing to buy from brands who they feel actually have more of a purpose behind them. And with the sort of millennials and Gen Zers, they're actually starting to look at like the value base is different, and is actually driving a lot of the market factors. So with all the businesses now focusing or increasingly focusing on this, and it is the larger businesses, one of the difficulties is that the smaller businesses are kind of left out of the loop. There's someone who's wanting to start up a business from scratch. They have no idea how sustainability, what exactly it all means, how it pertains to them, where they can start with a sustainability plan, what it will actually mean if they were looking for funding. And there needs to be more of this support, because it's not that they don't want to include it as part of their plan and their operations. It's just that there isn't necessarily the support or reasonably priced support at times to be able to, and they don't know where to start and where to look. So through our community interest company, we also look at supporting some of the startups, entrepreneurs, just basically those who really need and don't necessarily have the resource that some of the larger companies have, because it is going to be increasingly a competitive advantage. So yeah, that's the space that we're in.
It's very easy. You can, if you're a multinational, you can just throw money at this and kind of say, let's go green. But when you are, bootstrapping it, it's really hard. You work with individuals, you work with entrepreneurs, startups, and anyone who's interested in this kind of conscious capitalism. But is conscious capitalism itself a bit of a kind of oxymoron, if you like? Because, Einstein said you can't fix a problem with the same thinking that created it. Are we trying to use business to fix the problem that business created? And is it even the right tool to use,
Yeah, I think it is a driver for change. I think it's, if you have a tool, it completely depends on what it is that you're using it for. So you can apply the same type of tool for, you have, for example, those multi-tool pen knives. And if you think of capitalism in that way, so if you need a screwdriver part of it and that's what's going to bring you profit, then that's the bit that you use. If you need the knife, and that's the bit that's actually going to be supporting more purpose-driven initiatives, then that's what you use. But the reason that conscious capitalism, I believe, is a real mechanism to truly change things, is that the model of it allows a continual funding mechanism for the projects that can truly make a difference. And that's why you need that conscious part of it. So pure, capitalism is not something that's innately good or bad. Capitalism is just about making money. What is good or bad is how you choose to make it, whether you make it at all costs and what you choose to do with it. So, capitalism in itself is not necessarily the bad thing. It is what you choose to do with it. In the same way as money is not necessarily a bad thing. They say, a lot of people say, oh, money is the root of all evil. It's like, well, what do you choose to do with the money? and that's what it really comes down to. And so I think in terms of your point of, are we using, the thing that created the problem to try to solve it? If we continue to run business in the way that it has been run, then we just wouldn't get anywhere. We will end up with much of the same problems. We'll end up with increasing amounts of disparity. And that is just not where I would like to see the world. But it is about how we actually apply this. How do we actually apply what this solution is to the problem? And capitalism, is one of those. It's an opportunity. It's an opportunity to really allow for all of the resource that is needed to have an impact, to have a positive impact.
On a personal level, I mean, we are still hearing that, the phrase kind of greed is good in a way, and we hear it from some leaders in certain sectors. That greed is the fuel that drives the economy in a way. But on a personal level, there's often been this kind of idea that to be wealthy is evil, whereas to be struggling and to be kind of, impoverished is a sign of nobility and a sign of strength in a way. Is there kind of a shift happening that, people are kind of understanding that you can balance being comfortable, having a comfortable life with doing the right thing, and you don't need to kind of, reject money altogether in order to, live a good and worthy existence?
Yeah, I think we're seeing that a lot more in the younger generation that's coming up. So many of the startups that have a huge impact focus, there are so many more social enterprises that are starting now, so many businesses that are for benefit, and a lot of businesses that have, even if they're purely for profit in terms of their operations, that look at supporting good causes. So I think that mindset about how money and wealth is viewed is changing, and I think it's a generational shift. And I also think that you're right, those sort of stigmas around what it means to be a kind of good person or someone who's working for the community or for people. It's increasingly recognized that actually you can do more from a position of strength, and you can do more from a position of power. And if you are a good person and you don't try to get into those positions, chances are that potentially a bad person or someone who doesn't have the good intentions of people and the planet at heart might do. So there are a lot of, so that shift is happening where good people are starting to see that, it's not just about doing things from a grassroots level. Yes, you can work from that space, but there's nothing wrong with trying to get yourself into a position of power or of influence, or of, wealth in terms of funding, because wealth is different things to different people, but in terms of financial wealth, where you can then facilitate the things that you want to happen, the good and the positive things.
I mean, is it something that to live a comfortable life, to be wealthy, is it something that we can do without feeling ashamed if we're aligning it with our values? For example, like you've created a business that is, you're working with big organizations. You're probably doing quite well in terms of your turnover, that sort of thing. But you're very much aligned with some very strong values about what you're trying to do. The change you're trying to make. I mean, we live in a capitalist world. Should we be less afraid of saying, yeah, okay, I'm making some money here, and not feel guilty about that?
Yeah, I don't think that anyone should feel guilty about what it is possible for them to earn, because it's diminishing your potential and your value when you start to feel bad about it or guilty about it. I think there's nothing wrong with being in a comfortable position and knowing what that comfort level is for you, and striving toward it and aiming for it. If what's going to make you happy is very little, and that's the life that you want to lead, then lead that life. If you're driven to want to do more, and that kind of life is not going to help you achieve that, then consider what kind of life will help you achieve that. And it might be that you need to earn more or make more, and it's possible for you to, but it's a mindset shift that actually needs to happen as well. So I don't think that anyone should feel bad or guilty about wanting to earn more, about being more comfortable, about being in a position where they're able to do more for their family, their friends, themselves, and beyond that, their communities, and the planet. I think it's something which, if it's possible and you are driven to it, then you owe it to yourself to try. And I don't think that it's right to associate a negativity or a guilt to that.
You talk about sort of being driven by
Mm-hmm.
by something, by being driven by something you believe in. How do you know that it is something that is a real genuine passion, and not just a kind of superficial goal to you might go into it saying, I want to set up a business, social enterprise, doing good and returning kind of that benefit back to the community. But how do you know that is not just actually you're greenwashing yourself in a way, and your goal isn't just to actually become incredibly rich and just deal with the guilt by saying all of these things and reframing it in a way?
Yeah. Well, for some people, it is just that they want to make lots of money, but they're choosing to do a little bit of good along the way, because that that is the way that their mind works, and for that time they will perhaps believe it. But I think most people know at heart whether something is part of a strategy, and just a way to get them to where they want to get to, or whether that path is part of a passion, and they feel that it's purpose driven. And one of the ways of determining whether it is real passion or purpose is to consider if you lost absolutely everything trying to do it, if it is still something that you'd want to continue trying to do, or you'd have any regrets about trying to do. And for me, even the things where, like I'd said, things had gone horribly wrong, I wasn't regretful of trying and of going down that journey. What I was regretful of were some of the decisions that I made during that journey, because they weren't smart decisions. So it was more, okay, that's something I'm not doing again, and it didn't put me off continuing down that path on that journey. So I think that's a big driver, and or a big determinant of the driver, thinking in that way, and also assessing the why. A lot of people talk about, oh, what's your why? Why do you want to do this? And it's about really getting to the core of that. So it's why that why. Whatever that is, why that, and actually really getting to the core of it. And usually the core of it is not a thing, it's a reason. And when you get to that base reason, you will better understand whether the end goal is something that's superficially related, or whether it truly is purpose driven. But yeah, a couple of little kind of reverse engineering.
Absolutely. I mean, it's really interesting, the kind of why thing. I mean, I think it was Nietzsche said, whoever has a why doesn't really need to worry about the how. And then Simon Sinek as well. He's another great thinker in the kind of human-led business thinking space. He talks about discover your why. How do we get into that? Do we need to? And I mean, I suppose it's different for organizations, but on a personal level, and maybe you can share some light from your own experience of having built a business up and then lost it all and then built it up again. How do we get down to that why? Is it purely emotional, or can we just, can we choose a why? Is it something we can pick off the shelf, if you like, or does it have to be something that deeply resonates with who you are?
Your why is usually something that deeply resonates, and then you choose things which help you to achieve the outcomes that are associated with your path related to that. So for example, because that will all sound quite abstract, so for example, if your aim is to make a lot of money, and then you think, okay, why do I want to make a lot of money? Like, because I want to help people. No, but why? Why do you want to help people? I want to help people because people are struggling. Okay, but why is that important to you? And you continue to dissect it until it gets to the point of, okay, well, for me, that why is, where I come from, and what I've seen, and my experience of life growing up, and how I see and how I relate to other people, and what I want for those people. So my why is, when you get right down to it, it is an emotional thing on a very genuine and emotional level. You want to see people in a specific situation, whether it's your family or your friends or your, or the world, whatever that is. And once you get to that point and you think, okay, well, right, so I want to earn to be able to do the things that are going to get these people into that position. If it's a superficial why, then if your first attempt doesn't go well, you'll give up because you don't truly believe enough, or it doesn't affect you enough to continue to work toward trying to get, to arrive at your end goal. And it doesn't matter, not in a bad way, more in a kind of business pivoting way. It wouldn't matter how it is that you would get to your end goal. So people who are driven, and that's why you often find entrepreneurs and serial entrepreneurs who try lots of different businesses and aren't necessarily tied to one specific thing. It's because whatever that why is more than just achieving or making that one business a success. It's actually greater than that. Like the end goal for them, that's going to facilitate the reason that they're, or is behind the reason that they're doing everything that they're doing, is much greater than that. And so it's not, so the why isn't even necessarily related to how it is that you go about doing things. It's really related to your continual drive and the passion and the motivation and the energy and the ability to replenish the energy to keep working toward your goals. because it comes from a very deep place. And when it comes from that place, it's at a point where you almost don't have a choice. You just, have to keep going. So, yeah.
You talked about that kind of keeping that energy going, and a good strong why will keep that energy going. And I mean, in your job as well, I mean, you clearly have a very strong why, you have strong values, but there must be a lot of really tedious, boring, corporate stuff you have to deal with. There's legislation, there's contracts, all of this kind of stuff. How do you reframe that? For someone who has to, that perhaps their why is putting a roof over the head of their families, but they have to go to an office job every day. And actually, it's quite a soulless experience that they're having. How can they reframe their kind of day-to-day mundanity in order to keep that why front and center?
Yeah. So there are a couple of things. The one thing for me, which helps me, that helps me to get through it, is that there are certain tasks which I think as necessary evils, and they're just on the checklist. So I think of it in a very kind of pragmatic way, and it's just a checklist. It's just something I need to get through. So I don't attach an emotion to it. Yes, it's tedious or whatever, and that's just the fact of the matter. It's just how it is. But I just do it and get it over and done with. And if it needs a certain amount of time, allocate that time. Yes, at times I'll procrastinate and it will be the last thing that I do, or I'll be doing it, 5 minutes before the deadline, but you figure out the way that it works for you and you get it done. The other thing is finding things which you feel quite passionate about. So for me, thankfully, I have a balance of those just by virtue of what I do. I have a balance of the boring and mundane things, the proposal writing and research, although some of the research is very interesting and discovering new and wonderful things all the time, but some of it is just tedious. And but then it's balanced out with things that I really love doing, and people that I talk to, discovering amazing things that are happening in the world, seeing the change, being part of the bigger picture, and actually seeing some things come to life, and getting to explore and discover amazing new ways of being able to do more good, and being impassioned and inspired by so many of the people that I meet and I work with and I speak to. And what I would say is that if you don't have that as part of your day-to-day, then find something that gives you that. And even if it's a very small part of your week or your day or your month, if you find that thing, it helps to give you something to look forward to. It helps to give you that little bit of an energetic boost that you need to help you get through through some of the more mundane stuff. And that can be, what it can be anything. It can be, engaging with things online or chatting to people who enjoy the same things as you, even if it's, I don't know, Star Trek or whatever, whatever it might be. Because sometimes it's even just the conversations about things that you feel passionately about or that you really love. And when you're talking to someone else who also feels passionately about it, there's that amplification of energy. And you'll hear it when you hear people talk about things that they both feel strongly about. And even when it's a movie or a fictional character or a game or a travel spot or travel. So whatever it is, find that something and find a way to connect with it in the way that's most convenient for you, and make it a part of your life. Make it a regular part of your life, whether that's something you can do daily or weekly or monthly. And one of the ways that people do this, and people don't actually often realize that it's something that energizes. When people look at cat videos or dog videos and that sort of thing, it's something that they love and they feel passionately or strongly about. And for that moment, because there's this thing about smiling and laughing and that feel good factor, it helps to energize. So even little things like that, you find your thing and you essentially deploy it strategically into your life in a regular way.
I mean, is there a sense that you need a kind of conscious awareness of what's going on up here in your brain and in your heart in a way, so that you don't just fall into a kind of routine of, go to work, go home, watch soap operas, eat dinner, go to bed, go to work, go home, that kind of thing? Is there a kind of sense that you need to acknowledge that, there is more to life, even if it's just a little kick of happiness from a cat video, or a kind of bigger goal or a bigger kind of picture that is just beyond us as kind of mechanical robots in a way, just going through our day to day?
Yeah. So this is an interesting one. So for me, I feel that personally for me, it's important to be aware, because there are certain things that I want to achieve and do and create that I haven't yet. And so the more aware I am of how I am, my state, where I am, that sort of thing, the more I can build on, develop, tweak, and get myself there. It's different for different people. So some people are content. They don't feel a need to do anything more than do what they're doing, and that might just be going to work, coming home, watching TV, going out with friends for a few drinks, go to work, go home. Exactly the same thing. But for anyone who feels like, okay, this, that little bit of unsettling feeling or discontentment, then I would say, yes, it's time to start becoming a little bit more aware and just tap into your thoughts and tap into what you're thinking, tap into what you're feeling, tap into, why you might be feeling this way and how you can potentially shift that. So it really comes down to, are you content or not? And in the realm of where you are and what your context is, what is it possible for you to do to shift that?
Because I suppose that's the big thing. I had a conversation with a friend of mine recently, and I was telling him about, my podcast, and I have a kind of a self-awareness practice. I journal, I do all of these kind of things. And I kind of said to him, what would you do if money was no object and you didn't have to kind of go to the office every day? What would you do with your life? And he said, oh, I'd probably just potter about. I like just pottering, doing little things here. And for me, I don't know what I would do if I didn't have those limitations. But suddenly it kind of struck me, actually, yes, some people already have what they need, and they're not discontent like I am. There isn't this kind of itch that needs to be scratched. And I'm actually quite jealous of that. I wonder if you've talked in the past about goals getting in the way of actually helping you live a happy life. Is there a danger that this itch, this kind of desire can never be scratched and can sometimes maybe even become a little bit unhealthy?
Well, I would say the focus on goals can sometimes get in the way, but actions don't. So when your focus is on actions, then every time you take an action, you've achieved something. And so it's a level of fulfillment. When you're focusing on goals tend to often, people set goals which are, far away, pretty big, don't necessarily think about the actions in between. And that becomes a constant niggle in the back of your mind. It's okay, I'm working towards something. So I think yes, it's fine to have a bigger view of what you're working towards. And yes, you can call that a goal. But what's more important and what's less likely to get you down and frustrated is to have the actions that are aligned with what your vision is or where you want to get to. And so, if today all that is for you is going onto YouTube and finding a new video of somebody inspiring that you want to listen to and learn a little bit more about, and that's actually going to help you to expand the way that you think, and eventually going to help you toward whatever it is that you might be working toward. Then if by the end of the day you found that video and you've watched someone and you've actually gleaned a bit of info from it, then you'd feel like you achieved something. Whereas if you're thinking, okay, well, my aim is enlightenment, and the end of the day you've watched 10 videos and you don't feel enlightened because it's framed in the wrong way. So it's really about, okay, what is the vision and what are the goals? And so what is the vision and what are the actions that you're taking? And in a very pragmatic sense, thinking about the actions that are possible within the timeline that you have as well, and within the context of your life. We have to be realists. We have things going on which also have to be catered to within the mix of what we feel our purpose and passion is, and that's just life. So it's okay, well, how does this factor in, and what are the actions which I'm taking to help me just take one step closer, and just bearing in mind what the vision is.
Is there a sense then that because I've set myself a personal goal, and that is to run a marathon in less than 4 hours, and I've kind of taken the time limit off it because I don't have a lot of kind of free time anyway, so I'm just going to kind of get there when I get there. And I've set myself kind of mini goals, if you like. And so the first goal was to run 5K in under half an hour. The next one is 10K in under an hour, and so on and so on. And when I get to the one goal, I can then move on to trying to get to the next one. Is that then really the goal is sometimes the thing that can frustrate you and can kind of, the thing that can undermine your motivation in a way, but the action of just getting out and running, for example, if I want to be a runner, I need to get out and run. If I want to become an expert on socially conscious entrepreneurism and business, then I need to do the things that someone in that space would do. I need to behave that way. I need to read the books that they read. I need to kind of just embody that kind of vision of what I want to become.
Exactly. And that's a perfect example, the running. So, say, okay, the action is get out and run for as far as I possibly can, or as long as I possibly can. And then when I can't anymore, I'll just walk back. And thereafter, tomorrow, okay, going to see how far I can run for today and try to make it a little bit further. And even if you don't intend for it and you don't say, I'm going to run further than I did yesterday, subconsciously, your aim will be to go further, because we have an innate drive to do better than we did before when we're in situations like those. So it's about, what are the actions, and okay, well, tomorrow I'm going to watch some videos and learn how to stretch properly.
Yeah.
So those types of things. And particularly if you haven't put a time limit on it, as long as you're taking those consistent actions, you'll get there. Whereas if you're thinking, okay, I've got to run 5K, and every day that goes on that you haven't, you're thinking, I'm no closer to this goal. And like you say, it's frustrating. And it can also become demotivating, which is even worse than frustration. So,
and you give up altogether, and you
mm,
kind of throw your hands up in defeat. Do you think any of this played a part in your kind of your your first failure, if you like? Do you think that there were any of these kind of things where you subconsciously undermined your own why, if you like?
I think it was actually the opposite. And this is why I'm now at a point where I try to be quite aware. I think I mentioned that a little while ago, because uh, I was so driven by this need and this want to have things work. And because things had started to work and it actually were going quite well and everything was running smoothly, I fell into the trap of the expectation that it would just continue to do so. And also, um, not necessarily acknowledging the signs that it wasn't quite going to plan. And so I ended up in a terrible situation. And it's also about knowing the people around you and assessing the right people and the right people to partner with. And when you're in I talked about gaining energy from people who are in the right space with you, or right space as you. One of the things that I learned was, because of that very tough lesson, was to assess whether people were genuinely in that space, or essentially pretending to be in that space for their own purposes. And it happens a lot. You have people who will say that they enjoy the same things as you, or want to have achieve the same outcomes as you do, and have the same goals. And that's more so the case when there is something of benefit to them. And when you're so driven by that need or that want to achieve something, that you want to believe that it's true and it's right, and that they can actually do the things that they said they could do, or they are actually who they say they are. And I suppose it's akin to relationships in some way, where people kind of go by hope rather than what is actually the case. If you like someone enough, you kind of hope that things, even if it's not quite exactly how you'd want it to be, you hope that it's going to change and that it will be. Or you don't see warning signs in bad relationships, and it happens to lots of people many times in their lives. But it's because of that hopeful nature and that desire and that want to have something work out. And for me personally, that was what it was. It just, I wanted so badly for it to continue to be and to achieve so much more, that I almost willed away the warning signs. And as we know, that doesn't happen. We just imagine that it's not there, but they actually are.
Do you think we need to have these kind of pain points on our road to whatever success it is that we're moving towards? Do you think we need those kind of moments where we crash and burn so that we can come, be reborn a little bit wiser, a little bit less kind of motivated by our why, and just a bit more aware of where we're going?
Yeah. So I think, I don't think it's something we have to go through. I think they help with lessons. And if you're the kind of person who needs to learn that lesson, then it's something you're going to go through. If you didn't need to learn the lesson, you wouldn't, like for me, I wouldn't have had that error in judgment, and I wouldn't have needed to learn that lesson. None of that would have happened. So essentially, in a way, it's kind of like, you being handed what it is you need to learn.
Yeah.
If there was nothing I needed to learn, perhaps it would have all been smooth sailing. I'd just been doing everything the right way and would all be fantastic, all the time. But when things go wrong, it's usually just because that's something that we need to learn, so that we can do it better or do it right next time. I don't think we have to. I think it's just one of those weird ways of the world that's what happens, because you don't quite know how to get it right. So you get it wrong and then how to get it right.
It's interesting. There's a woman called Pema Chodron, and she says that the same things, the same difficult lessons will keep happening to you until you learn what they're trying to teach you, and then you can move on. And I suppose that's, in a way, will keep making those mistakes until, or the mistakes will keep cropping up until you are ready to kind of acknowledge that, oh, hang on a minute, maybe I was a little bit too blinkered, or I was a bit too kind of blinded by my passion, or my my will to succeed, if you like. So it feels like we're getting a little bit of a kind of roadmap towards living a kind of life of fulfillment, to kind of be aware of our goals and to be aware of our why at both ends of that spectrum, but to really focus in on the actions that you need to do to kind of move into that space. But this all comes with kind of lashings and lashings of self-awareness, so that you can say, well, hang on a minute, am I being conscientious enough? Am I doing this from a genuine place of kind of authenticity? Am I really connected with my true motivations and my values? Or is there something else going on here that I'm not acknowledging? Do you think if we can get super authentic, focusing on actions, then we're kind of more kind of aligned with a successful road towards our goals, even if there are a few bumps along the way?
Yeah, I think it's a combination of things. So it's about being self-aware, but it's also about being aware of your surroundings, and being aware of the people that are around you. And a lot of people talk about your tribe, in terms of like on your path to success, or whatever it is, having that tribe. And thinking about that in a way which is, you have people that essentially fulfill different roles as part of your tribe. And you have people who are, just your cheerleaders and supporters, and will help you along the way, the ones that you bounce ideas off, the ones that you look to for inspiration, advice, and all sorts. And the ones that you look to for actually knowing what you need to know. And this isn't always business, the business of business. Sometimes this is about context and market and what people actually want and what people need. And I believe that, and if you see some of the people who are increasingly influential, their tribe is more than just their supporters or peers or whatever. Their tribe essentially becomes the people that they're marketing to, but people don't see it in that way. They see themselves as being a part of that community, or they belong. And I think moving forward in terms of success, it's determining, yes, being self-aware and being aware of who you are, where it all comes from, what you're driven toward, what the actions are that you need to consistently take, and how these need to change at which points in time, but also being aware of your surroundings, being aware of what you need to support you on different levels. And for different people, it will be different things. And sometimes it's just, a solid group of friends. Sometimes it's, people who don't know you on a personal level, but you can have really deep business conversations with, and get feedback and advice. And for some people, it's, having essentially the fan base, and knowing what they're up to and being in tune and engaging with them. But I think, it's often a combination of those things.
Yeah, that's I did a podcast with a woman called Pip Jameson back in the early days of the podcast, and she is an entrepreneur, and she has a kind of mentor group of other entrepreneurs, and they get together and they discuss ideas. But I've also spoken to authors who have very close knit groups of readers who will give them very honest and sometimes quite brutal feedback. And sometimes that's what they need, depending on where they are, what they're working on, what the project is. You sound like you're juggling about 20 different projects at once. There is one that you're kind of keeping a little bit under wraps at the moment, judging by some of the things you've written. What exciting things have you got coming up next?
Yeah, so the technology platform, which is called the Impactoverse, is actually what's on the cards next, and we're looking at building that out. That's going to be a platform that allows for support of impact initiatives that have potential to get them to a point where they can be vetted and validated for verifiable impact, whether that's startup or existing, and a common body of knowledge around impact initiatives globally, and a platform for equitable funding that is based purely on impact merit rather than so much of the conversation around gender bias or race bias and that sort of thing in funding, but looking at an equitable funding platform that is purely merit-based. So that's quite exciting and in development. And our Think Ocean project, which is underway, there's so much happening with that. So if anyone is keen to check it out, thinkocean.earth, and we're doing some exciting projects with Derby University and looking at launching a fashion range in February, London Fashion Week.
Wow.
And Intelli Aqua, which can really change the face of the aquaculture industry, just allowing for it to be more sustainable by utilizing technology. So a few of the things, and then always happy to support nonprofits, support other organizations who are really focused on real impact outcomes. And also just helping entrepreneurs, whether they're impact focused or not, and have, little stumbling blocks or feel like they could do with a sounding board. But yeah, that's
I mean, do you ever sleep? It sounds like you've got more than enough to keep you busy.
I do. I think I've been asked this before actually about juggling, and for me it's just about timing. So it's about what you prioritize when, and working on different things at different points in time. So I don't have to work on everything all at once. Sometimes there are points in time where everything is happening, everything demands attention all in one day, but that's very seldom that's the case where it intensively requires, input. But yeah, so it's about prioritizing and managing time. And when you are, you do really enjoy what you do, you don't mind working longer hours. And at times like those, it's actually about scheduling in time off. So
yeah, absolutely. And I suppose as well, when you're working on so many different projects, that kind of variety makes things incredibly interesting. You can pick one thing up, put something else down, and it's the spice of life after all, isn't it? That's what they say.
Yeah, absolutely. So yeah, like I said, it's different points in time, different things happening, but it does keep it very interesting. And it also allows for me to continually learn more about different industries and what's happening out in the world, and new innovations. And yeah, it's It's awesome.
Fantastic. And if anybody wants to find out more about any of these projects and about kind of what you do, where's the best place for them to go and look?
LinkedIn is best.
Yeah.
Great on other social media. And I'm most responsive on LinkedIn. So that's where you can find me.
Fantastic. Well, I'll put links to everything in the show notes and at the end. And yeah, it's fascinating and really interesting about, this whole idea of action. I think that's a kind of new one for me. It's always, for me, it's sort of always been about goals and then sub goals and then micro goals, but just this notion of kind of taking action in the space you want to be in, I think is really a new way of me thinking about things. So I'm very grateful for that. And
I'm really grateful for you having me on and being such an active listener.
Oh well, it's so much good stuff to listen to. It's been a really wonderful conversation. So thank you ever so much for that.
And thank you for having me. Do take care.
So there we go. That was the very insightful Noleen Mariappen, encouraging us to find our tribes, own our impact, and to not be afraid or ashamed of seeking out success. You can find out more about Noleen at www.noleenm.com. And of course, all of those links, all of the other links I mentioned at the beginning of the show will be in the show notes. So seek those out. And don't forget to rate, review, share and subscribe wherever you get this podcast, and head over to conversationsonliving.com to find more episodes, essays, writing, meditations, and much, much more. And if you want to support this site and align yourself, your business, your project, whatever it is that you might be working on with what we're doing here, just head over to the website and get in touch. It all helps to keep our huge data center going and to feed the vast army of technicians who all work behind the scenes here on the podcast. They're busy pulling levers, pressing buttons, and programming the mainframe, and they all need to be fed. Stay tuned for more interesting conversations, and in the meantime, have a wonderful